Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Welcome to the Protiviti and Microsoft Compliance Roundtable with a keen focus on Microsoft solutions. Before we started, I just wanted to let everyone know that we will be recording today's session to accommodate those who are keen to attend but unfortunately sit in an inappropriate time zone so they can watch this at their leisure. We really want to make this an informative and interactive session today, so please do raise your hands or post questions in the chat where myself and the team that are supporting this will endeavour to get to you to answer all of your questions. We've brought a strong team of experts together today to share their knowledge around the compliance landscape, but also the focus and capability that Microsoft are bringing into this space. So, without further ado, let's have a look at the agenda. We'll kick off with some introductions while I'll introduce the team to you. Then I'll give you some details about us as an organisation, Protiviti, and on what we're focused on. Excuse me. And I'll then hand over to Andrew, where he's going to talk about the compliance landscape, and from that perspective, really help us understand the challenges and the risks around that. We'll then hand over to Sanjana, who's going to introduce us to Microsoft Compliance Manager and really give us a demonstration of the capability of the solution itself. From that perspective, we'll hand over to Jonathan, who's going to bring everything together, where we connect the dots from a technology, from a compliance perspective, and really then begin to share all of the other capabilities that Microsoft has. It really does give you a rich outcome to the challenges that you face. From there, we'll then step back and we'll go and engage Andrew again, who's really going to help us understand how you as a customer can think about your roadmap. We hear from a lot of clients and a lot of customers around how they want to simplify their environments, how they want to streamline, how they want to maximize the ROI on the investments that they've made. So understanding what you've currently got, what you're currently faced, and how you can maximize that ROI from a Microsoft perspective and from an application perspective is one of the key things that we'll help deliver on today. We will run a number of polls during the session, so we hope to stimulate some good questions and some feedback from you that we can all discuss. And as I said, please do not hesitate to ask questions as we go through. If you could move on, Ben, please. Without further ado, let's introduce the team. So firstly, Sanjana, can I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, thanks, Jez. Hi, everyone. I'm a compliance technical specialist at Microsoft. I come from a security and compliance background, but within Microsoft, I am aligned to the public sector accounts, mainly the central government, policing, as well as national security. And my main role is to help understand what challenges customers are facing in the compliance space and how they can leverage Microsoft solutions to assist them on their compliance journey. I'm really excited to be a part of the session today. And yeah, looking forward to the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjana, and welcome. Jonathan, can I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hello, everyone. Jonathan Trios. I'm an associate director here in the United States with Protiviti. Been here about 11 years. I actually had the opportunity to serve on Microsoft's Compliance Global Black Belt team earlier this year, focused on Compliance Manager. So had a lot of interaction with the product group, with customers, and driving the roadmap on the product itself, and then back here with Protiviti and building solutions and helping our clients get up to speed with Compliance Manager and see how to leverage that to help you along your compliance journey. So excited to share what we've built here, what is in the roadmap for the product itself, and how we can potentially help you and others going forward.
Thank you, Jonathan. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yep. Thanks very much, Jez. Hi there, everybody. I'm Andrew Port. I'm a senior manager within Protiviti's technology consulting team. I'm based out of the London office. I've been with Protiviti for about 15 years and joined as a consultant back in the wee days. My primary focus is around, again, sort of compliance manager and Microsoft solutions, but I also have a background in sort of technology delivery and technology solutions as well within Protiviti.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. And lastly, myself. My name is Jeremy Haisman, or Jez Haisman. I am a director in our technology consulting business here at Protiviti in the UK. My focus is on leading the Microsoft solutions practice across not only Protiviti from a UK perspective, but across the EMEA space as well. So that's the team that's going to be presenting today. So Ben, if you could move on. I just wanted to give you, firstly, to start with, an overview of Protiviti. So those of you that have engaged with us before, it's nice to see you again. For those that you've not come across us before, Protiviti are a global management consultancy. We've been in business nearly 20 years now, and we have a really strong focus in the compliance, governance, internal audit, risk space, also business process improvement, etc. We really do focus in most of the verticals, industry verticals out there, but we have a very strong cadence in the finance sector, and we're very strong in that area. But as I said, we do work across most of the industry verticals. We have a very, very strong growing business. We've just released our latest results that have been really, really good for us, another increase in our business. And as you can see, we landed $1.4 billion in 2020. We operate in over 25 countries around the world. Loads of offices, you can see 85 there, with thousands of professionals working across the organization. We tend to serve the Fortune, 60% of the Fortune 1000 and 35% of the Global 500. But what kind of sets us apart as well is the fact that we also like working with those smaller organizations, those organizations that are embryonic, that are strategically growing their business with a keen focus on actually looking to go public in the long term. So we work with those types of organizations too. And one of our other key differentiators is our alignment with our sister company, Robert Half. For those that you know Robert Half, you'll know that they're one of, if not the largest staffing organisation globally. So not only do we have the capability to strategically help partners from a technology consulting perspective, but you also have the capability to augment the staffing requirements that a client has to help the internal teams actually deploy, manage, or ongoing those solutions to deliver the best outcomes. So all in all, we are very well placed to help customers across all requirements that they have. Thank you, Ben. From a technology consulting perspective, as you can see, we will engage with clients and help them across the whole life cycle of any project and any solution they're looking to deliver. It says from a digital transformation or business transformation perspective, we help them design their strategy, their governance and risk management, the program execution, etc., right the way around to creating the solutions and deploying those solutions all the way through to the ongoing operations and managements of those. As I said, we are keen and focused area on cybersecurity and privacy and compliance, but also really strong in our cloud space, hence why we work very closely with Microsoft, but we do work with other cloud solution providers as well. We work with software as a service, enterprise data, and also ERP and enterprise application solutions. Thank you, Ben. And as you heard me talk about Microsoft, and we've got a keen focus today, we are a 17-year Microsoft Gold partner. We have been nominated for a number of awards at the Worldwide Partner Conference. We have, as it says here, over 35,000 certified Microsoft professionals with an association with our Robert Half partnership. We have a team of MVPs, the creme de la creme of technical solutions individuals that work within Protiviti. And also we have latterly been adopted into the Microsoft Intelligence Security Association, MISA organization, where you will find details of Protiviti and the solutions that we bring to market from Microsoft security perspective. Thank you, Ben. Last one from me, just really focusing down on Microsoft. So we really do cover the whole suite from a Microsoft perspective, from enterprise cloud, from Azure, from a data migration, cloud migration, and cloud security perspective, from a Microsoft 365 deployment and integration, and latterly the growing focus on the Microsoft security stack from an M365 and, as I said, an Azure perspective. Other areas very strong with SAP on Microsoft Azure, with lots of customers now thinking about moving HANA and taking it into a cloud delivery model, and also application infrastructure and modernization. So that's just a little bit about us as an organization. So at this point, what I'd like to do is hand over to my colleague Andrew Poor, who's going to really dig into the compliance landscape and start setting the scene for us. So Andrew, over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Jess. Hi there, everybody. In terms of talking about risk and compliance itself, Ben, if you could go to the next slide. Before we go into the details, we're going to have a quick question and interactive quiz to get things started and get things moving. What we'll be doing with this quiz, if you could on the right hand side, as you can see, go to the website www.menti.com and enter the 8-digit code in your phone or on your web browser. That will take you to the poll questions that we have. Now, these questions are designed to be a little bit sort of challenging and also informative as well in terms of the areas that we'll be discussing and looking at today. So as part of that, if you can either go to menti.com and enter the code or use the QR code scanner to scan the QR code, that would open up into your phone or into your web browser itself. And what we'll do is we'll get going with the first quiz answer, quiz question, which we'll sort of have a couple of minutes to do. And once we've got the results of that, we can have a quick discussion into and looking at the risk and compliance space itself. So as you can see here, as this is a real-time sort of voting, you can see quite a few people have started to vote through here. And it'll be quite interesting to see what the responses to the questions are. So as you can see here, while you have your Menti poll open on your browser or on your phone, please keep that open and keep it remained open, because what we'll be doing is throughout today's session, we'll have a few other quizzes that we'll do just to test your knowledge and also just to inform you about some of these things that we'll be talking about as part of this risk and compliance process as well. So the first question we're starting off with today is, of the 195 countries in the world, how many do you think are regulated by data protection law? Is it above 60, above 80, above 100, or more than 120 countries who are regulated by data protection law? So we'll give it a couple of minutes just to get people's votes through. And for those who've just joined the call, if you can go to www.menti.com and use the 8-digit code, you can basically answer this poll question to test your knowledge around how many of the 195 countries in the world are regulated by data protection law. Okay. Now, while people are answering, going onto the site to answer this particular question, I'm just going to sort of talk a little bit about, thoughts around risk and compliance itself. I think a lot of the times people sometimes will be using the word risk and compliance sort of interchangeably. That isn't quite right. And in terms of looking at risk and compliance itself, what we want to be able to sort of determine and understand is risks are associated with various different opportunities. And if you manage and harness the risks that you have identified, then you can actually make the best of the opportunities that are out there and gain a competitive advantage within your sector or within your group to be able to get the most out of your organization. Now, before we go into any more details, we're going to stop the poll there for now, because I think there's been sort of over 40 people who voted on here. And as you can see here, out of the options itself, we've got a tie between people voting over 60 countries having data protection laws regulated, compared to, I think, 11 people who have also voted that they think there's about more than 120 countries in the world who think that they have data protection laws and regulations. So as part of the answer itself, I think, Bradley, do you want to share the answer with us before we move on?
Yes, obviously it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of who has voted for each. There's quite a few answers for all, but it is actually 120 plus, surprisingly. So back to you, Andy.
Thank you. So if you now go back to our slides that we have, so as you can see, over 120 countries actually have got data protection laws, and as you can see, out of the 195, of the 195 countries in total, so that's a significant amount of countries that do have some sort of data protection laws, and that links back into what I'm going to be talking about in terms of challenges, the increased challenges of risk and compliance within globally within the world, as well as within organizations as well. Now, a recent publication by Protiviti and the NC State University around looking at the top risks within sort of the world. We conducted a survey with Protiviti and the NC State University where we looked at these top risks. We questioned over 1,000 executives and board members around what they thought their top risks were within 2021, as well as looking 10 years into the future at 2030 as well. From the C-suite executives and board members that we interviewed globally, we looked at three main risk categories. One, which was macroeconomic risks. Secondly, strategic risks, and thirdly, operational risks. And within each of those categories itself, there were other risks examined and we looked at, and we gave options around 36 different risks within those three main categories. And what you can see from these top risks for 2021, based on the responses that we've had from over 1,000 C-suite members and board members, was that there's a significant amount of risks that look at the current pandemic and economic conditions. But what's quite interesting is if you have a look at the risks number 5 and 6 itself, Ben, can you just highlight the points 5 and 6 in here? You can see that privacy and identity management and information security and cyber threats feature in the top 10 top risks for executives in 2021, and that's quite a significant sort of result in there, as from what we've been through from last year as well as this year itself. We can see that the top 3 relate to the pandemic and the economic situation that we're encountering. But actually, on top of that, we do think about, and the executives do think about, what's happening from a privacy, information security, and cyber perspective. Now, linking to that in itself, what you can see with the scores that we have for 2021, in terms of the scoring itself, what the executives thought, where you have a score of above 6, is a significant impact to the organization. If you have a score of above between 4.5 and just under 6, it means that they think that there's going to be potentially a high impact on the organizations in these different risk areas. And if you have a score which scored below 4.5, it indicates that they think there's going to be less of a significant impact. And as you can see from this survey that we've conducted for 2021, the privacy and cyber threats risks come within the actual potentially high impact area and high impact scoring itself. Now, compared to the previous year's survey, so this survey has been taking place for the past 9 years, and Protiviti annually conduct this survey and send out these risk perspectives survey to the C-suite executives that we know, and we get the results back from them and we do the analysis. And as you can see from the previous year, it's the scoring is slightly down from where it was, but it still features quite prominently. And as you can see from the brackets from the 2020 column itself, the actual risks have slightly increased as well, or the perception of the risk has slightly increased for C-suite executives in the 2021 survey. Now, within the survey itself, if you go to the next slide, Ben, we also looked at and asked executives around what they thought were the top risks emerging in the next decade. And as you can see here again, if we can highlight the 2 risks around cyber and privacy and identity management, Ben, you can see that these risks continue to be in the top 10. So according to the responses from our executives and board members, they still continue to see privacy and identity management and information security as quite a high level prominent risk that will impact their organizations. And coupled with that, the cyber threats continue to be a high level risk amongst the respondents from the survey itself. Now, we can also see that from increasingly from working from home and more working remotely, as we move from a lot of the time spending time in offices working, that hybrid way of working that we've sort of started to sort of grown accustomed to, that means that there's new challenges as well as new opportunities that people face, and those risks become more prominent and I think more difficult to sort of manage if we don't do anything about it. Now, the sort of things that we will need as part of this process around looking at the risk and compliance space is actually leveraging technology to be able to help us manage these risks going forwards. And I think at this time in age as well, where we see information being quite easily being shared within organizations, we're able to make sure that we can leverage the technology to help us monitor and manage those risks going forwards. One of the things and the key messages from our report itself that we commissioned with in conjunction with NU University was actually the key message around the cybersecurity, privacy and identity access management and cyber threats is we need to make sure that we do the basics well. So having a good cyber hygiene and process around implementation of basic security measures will really help to protect and provide organizations with protection, especially when working remotely and accessing information through your own data connections. We also need to make sure that we take a holistic view around looking at and considering the best risk and compliance approaches to mitigating those risks at both an organizational level as well as company level as well within our companies and industries. And that means that we need to be able to share information around what's happening in the cybersecurity landscape, what's happening with the types of data protection laws, because again, from the data privacy and data protection point of view, it's not just about having one law, one regulation that's for everybody, globally. What we tend to find is with large multinational corporations, we have data protection laws that span across various different industries. We also have data protection laws that are country specific as well, and as you can see that from country to country they will have slight nuances in the way that they want to be able to have data privacy and data protection laws applied, and therefore we need to get a better understanding of managing those risks, what those individual risks are within the industry as well as within the countries themselves, and being able to apply that using technology to leverage these new processes and ways of managing and monitoring these risks and threats. The other area is around thinking about the people within organizations. I think you can have all the latest technology and gadgets that that you can possibly buy, and again, that's that's of the latest trend itself. But one really important thing to also think about and consider is the people itself. So making sure that we can understand, engage and educate our workforce around basic cybersecurity measures, fundamentally, defending against these internal threats. So again, you could have periodic testing of emails through sending out sort of test emails around phishing and malware emails, so that people get an understanding and also get used to these sort of emails that come through. You're able to sort of identify which ones might be phishing or sort of phishing emails, where again you're able to highlight to users that these emails you should not be clicking in, or you shouldn't be opening up attachments. You can also educate people around the use of basic passwords and security settings that they may have within not just their work devices but also the personal devices, and also identifying ways of making sure that people don't divulge information that that they have at hand. So again, when you're talking to people in different settings, making sure that you don't divulge too much information around your organization, around the sort of things that you may do if it relates to confidential information. If you go into the next slide, Ben. So within the reports itself, what we do have, and again, what we'll do as part of today's session is to send out a summary sheet and information around what we've covered today. And as part of that, we'll send you the links to these tailored reports specific to certain industries that we've looked at. So as part of our executive reports that we've done for 2021, and also looking forwards into the threats and risks for 2030, we've also created specific reports for different industries as well. So as you can see here, we've got industries around manufacturing and distribution, the financial services industry and the perspectives on that, and the key risks from, C-suite execs within that area itself, as well as energy and utilities, technology, media and telecoms, consumer products and services, and also the healthcare industry as well. Okay, if you go to the next slide, Ben. So before I go into the next part of itself and linking what we've talked about in terms of the risks, landscape, and our perspectives in 2021 and looking forward into 2030, I want to do a second poll question, which if you go to mentimeter.com, or if you've got your poll web browser open, the question should automatically refresh on that page. If you go onto that page, you should be able to see your second question, which is, in 2020, what was the grand total of fines published by the Financial Conduct Authority? So if you can go onto the menti.com and type in the code on the right-hand side, which is 87486418, you should be able to answer the poll question that we have here. So the poll question is, in 2020, what was the grand total of fines published by the Financial Conduct Authority? Was it 46 million, 73 million, or 193 million?
Andrew, we do have a question in the chat when you're ready.
Yeah, okay. So I think the question is from Linda. So how have governments weighed in on these risks? Are they equally aware as private sector companies of the severity of cyber threats? I think they are, Linda, and that's one thing that I will be covering after this poll that we have in there, because I think one of the things that, again, what we're seeing, and that links into a recent publication by Microsoft in terms of looking at one of the things that Microsoft has recently published just this month is looking at the digital defense report that they produced. So I'll have a look at that, and we'll talk about that in a minute as we wrap this poll up. So wrapping this poll up itself, it looks like the majority of the people have said the total fines published by the Financial Conduct Authority is 193 million. Can you let us know what the right answer is, Bradley?
Yes, the majority of people in the chat have actually got it right. 193 million is the correct total amount in 2020.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So going on to the next slide itself, let's tie into what Linda has said in the chat about, governments weighing in on these risks, and also looking at, the severity of the cyber threats itself. So in a very recent publication by Microsoft, which is the Microsoft Defense Digital Defense Report, they did a report around looking at all the different organizations that have been using Microsoft's various different security and compliance tools. And from that report and analysing the results of the information that they've been working with these various customers who use these different security and compliance tools itself, the report sort of ran and indicated that actually there are three main trends within what they found from the report itself. Firstly, it's looking at, and again they've sort of highlighted that the US government has actually taken steps to address cybersecurity using new laws and authorities to work on cybersecurity threats. And one of the things is this executive order announced in May earlier this year, which has gone a long way to make the US federal government and those working for the federal governments more secure. So there are laws and regulations that they are putting through and are starting to put in place to address that. And again, as part of this process, what we'll do is we'll also share a link to the information around the Microsoft Digital Defense Report so that you can see more of that information in detail. The second trend that they're looking at also, and they've also highlighted, is that governments around the world are actually introducing and passing new laws, which is requiring organizations to make it mandatory to try and report on and discovering new cyber attacks and cyber threats. So again, I think what they're essentially trying to do is making sure that companies report and work with government agencies to make sure what the sense and scope of the problem is, because I think oftentimes what you do find is companies are targeted around cyber threats, through cyber threats, and what happens is oftentimes they may not report it, or it is reported but at a much later stage. What governments want to do is making sure that these things are reported very timely, and also they're working together with governments to actually identify trends and patterns around the type of threats organizations are facing, the severity of them and the frequency of those threats as well, so that there's more joined up thinking between organizations and governments around these particular threats as well. And then the third key takeaway from the report itself is looking at both governments and companies, and both governments and companies coming forward and being relatively transparent around the victims of those attacks themselves as well. So if by having a transparent process itself, it helps people to better understand the problem, also enables people to engage with the government and first responders. So that's the cybersecurity community around the types of threats that are out there, whether they're new or existing ones, and how to actually mitigate those threats and combat those threats going forwards as well. And by sharing that information between organizations and governments, it means that they can actually address and combat those threats on a timely basis, and also make sure that they're sort of joined up in the way that they respond to these things as well. So those are the key three takeaway trends from the report itself. Now, the other things that we've noticed also, and again, the report highlights, is that fewer than 20% of Microsoft customers are using strong authentication technique, strong authentication features such as multi-factor authentication when they're sort of using the various different products through Microsoft technologies themselves. And what they've highlighted is that if organizations actually apply the basic cyber hygiene, such as enabling multi-factor authentication, using anti-malware in the systems, and making sure that the systems are regularly kept updated, then what this report predicts is that over 99% of the attacks today that we see would be protected if those basic cyber hygiene and sort of settings were enabled in itself as well. And again, that's a very high percentage, but it goes to show that doing some of the basics and doing it right means that you can go a long way to protecting your organization through some of these cyber attacks and measures that you may encounter and see as well. Now, obviously, we know that, you know, as we work more remotely and things go more virtual along the way, the nature of the attacks will be more frequent, and also the complexity of the attacks will be also increased as well. And that's where some of the trends and some of the findings from the report comes in, where the transparency and the communication between organizations as well as governments are paramount, because that will help us to be able to identify the more complex attacks and sort of cyber sort of attacks that will be out there, and there'll be better ways for us to be able to share that information and to actually do something about it in itself as well. Now, I think one of the things that we can sort of link into here is looking at and talking, as we're talking about the, you know, the cybersecurity space itself and information security. I know, Sanjana, you've been working in this space quite a lot, and again, being within the Microsoft space itself, can you shed some light on some of the things that you're sort of, you know, you've been doing within Microsoft to address some of these things, and some, you know, some of the solutions and things that we're going to be talking about?
Sure, thanks, Andrew. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're spot on in terms of the amount of signals that we are getting, and we're generating loads of activities around there. But additionally, I would want to also highlight that because you're having that digital transformation journey going on across the different organizations, data is massively increasing, and we see them, I mean, it is growing massively. And the additional thing is that regulations are also increasing. Now, with your Menti poll, we got the answers that there are around 160 plus that regulations that are around there. So it's basically about how do you keep up with those sort of regulations, and especially when there are around 220 daily updates going on across those regulations. So I think that is also key player, I guess. And I think the way that technology also helps with this is simplifying those sort of management, and additionally also giving you those simple tools to then help understand what is the landscape across my compliance stack, and where do I need to work on, which are the areas that I need to improve in order to be up to date with those regulations. So I think that also becomes a key player. And Microsoft has actually invested a lot in terms of risk and compliance, in terms of, again, having that transparency with our customers, and also the features that matters most to our customers. So again, like in terms of the investments, I do have an announcement to share with the wider team. But again, do you want me to, do you have another question coming up, Andrew, now, or should we sort of transition into that area?
Yeah, so Denise has sort of asked about sharing sharing the links to the reports, and we will be sharing the links through a summary letter that we have. So the links will be there, and you can get access to all the reports that we've mentioned in today's session itself. But as you say, go ahead and share the news about the investment.
Perfect. So Microsoft has recently announced last week, especially when I talked about the investments that Microsoft has been making. Microsoft has recently announced last week about a new solution called Privacy Management that it has launched. And Privacy Management is Microsoft's first solution in the privacy management software market, which will basically help customers and organizations to safeguard their personal information. And not just safeguarding personal information, it is also about identifying those critical risks around your privacy landscape. So things like data transfers, data overexposures, and minimization, and also helping you automate those privacy operations and subject access requests at scale. It also allows and empowers employees to make those smart data handling decisions. So it's quite a powerful solution that has been launched in the privacy space. But I guess this is not the agenda for the session today, but just wanted to bring everyone up to the attention that this has been launched recently last week. So we'd be happy to share additional details after the session. And again, privacy management is also a solution that will help you comply with those existing regulations as well. And it works sort of hand in hand with Compliance Manager, which I think we will start to get into.
Yeah, that's right. And as you can see from our report, from the executive perspectives report, privacy and sort of identity management features very heavily on both the 2021 survey results, as well as looking forward into the future to the 2030 results as well. And I think in both occasions, I think they rank sort of fifth in both of those sets of surveys. So it's a very timely announcement to talk about that. And as you say, we can share that information as part of our sort of follow-up sort of information that we'll share with the attendees. But going back to sort of Compliance Manager itself, you know, as we've sort of seen before in looking at the various different, you know, top risks from people itself. Can you tell us a little bit more about the sort of the Compliance Manager, and sort of maybe do a bit of a walkthrough on you know, what Compliance Manager covers and how it looks like as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just start sharing my screen. I guess that's a better way to just start doing the demonstration. I hope you're able to see my screen now.
Yeah, I can see the screen. Can
Okay,
everybody else see the screen?
Yes.
Excellent.
Perfect.
You got thumbs up.
All right, thanks, Andrew. So Compliance Manager is sort of a feature in the Microsoft Compliance Center that will help you manage your organization's compliance requirements with greater ease and convenience. And today I'm just going to walk you through some of the basic features that will help you understand how the solution meets your organization's compliance requirements by providing recommended actions that you can then apply against the industry standards that matter most to your organization. Now, in the Compliance Manager, so this is a place that is within the Compliance Center. Now, on the left, the very first thing that you see is the overall compliance score. So here is the place where you get that quick snapshot view of what is your overall compliance score, and against the different industry standards that you are assessing your organization against. And just below that, you see your points achieved as well as Microsoft managed points achieved. Now, this is showing you the benefits of that shared responsibility model. where organizations who are on that path of that digital transformation or migrating to the cloud, Microsoft as a cloud service provider will provide built-in data protection controls in our service to secure that data, while your organization might still need to take some actions to implement those effective controls and meet those regulatory requirements. So this is talking about that shared responsibility model where you can quickly see that where Microsoft has implemented those controls and where you need to take those actions to implement some specific controls that are respective to your organization. And additionally, on the right, I guess just getting before the right, I think I wanted to also stress that out of the box, you sort of get the compliance score based on the standard template, which is called the data protection baseline, which will basically is reliant on the set of controls and standards that are in alliance with that have been taken up from templates like GDPR, NIST, ISO, and FedRAMP. So it is basically a set of controls that is identifying key regulations and standards for data protection and general data governance. So the score that you're getting out of the box is sort of coming from the data protection baseline, but you can have your own assessments with respect to your industry specific regulations, and you can assess your compliance score against that. So moving on to the right, you see those key improvement actions. So these are the improvement actions that you need to be taking in order to improve your compliance score. And you can see against every improvement actions, there is an impact. So it tells you that what sort of impact it will have on your compliance score if you go about implementing that improvement action. So from a compliance officer or a DPO or from a privacy professional's perspective, if they come into this interface, they can quickly understand that what is their overall compliance score. Sorry, was there a question? Right. So what is their overall compliance score and what sort of actions they need to take in order to enhance their overall compliance score? Scrolling down, you will be able to see those compliance score breakdown by categories. So this is an easy to understand categories as to areas where you need to take some enhancements just to check the progress as to how things are progressing in those respective areas, be it around governing information or protecting against threats. And you will be able to see those improvement actions against every individual category to then go in and understand what's happening, what sort of improvement actions I need to be assigning to my individual departments so that they can go in and work on that specific piece. So this is one place where you can go into the improvement actions. The other place is you have got a whole set of improvement actions tab where you can quickly see all of the improvement actions that you as an organization need to be taking in order to work on that compliance journey and again, improvise your compliance score. So within improvement actions, you will be able to filter it down by looking at, which improvement actions have been passed or have been failed with high risk or are in progress. So this basically helps you narrow down your information that you're looking for. And additionally, you can also filter it down by regulations. So these are the sort of assessments that I'm assessing my organization's estate against. Now let's take a step back and get into the assessments where this is actually the starting point that you will start with in terms of defining what sort of assessments are important for your organization and then starting to assess your overall compliance score against that. So I already have got 3 assessments within my demo environment, but adding an assessment is fairly easy. Now, Microsoft provides range of templates in adherence to those privacy regulations or those information protection standards, or even regional specific templates that can be leveraged to assess your overall organization's compliance score. Now, taking an example, you can just create an assessment by selecting a specific template. Now, in this example, let's say we pick up ISO 27001. The moment I select it, you can just specify the very next thing is the assessment name. So you can just define that it is an ISO 27001 template. You can use any existing groups or create a new group. The difference between grouping is that if you have got multiple professionals working within your estate, so if you have got a set of compliance managers working on a specific assessment, whereas a DPO is working on a specific assessment, you can have those groupings defined as well. But yeah, essentially, once you have select your template, once you define it, you can then start to create an assessment. Now, I already have got a few assessments created. I'll just go into one of them to quickly give you an idea of what it looks like. So let's get into data protection baseline. Now, within the assessment, you will basically get an overall sort of progress of that assessment. So in here, like you can see, the assessment has progressed by about 55%. You can also see that shared responsibility model. Again, what are the points achieved by yourselves? How many are achieved by Microsoft? And again, talking about the key improvement actions here. So these are the steps that you need to be taking in order to improve your compliance score, as well as progress your assessment. And scrolling down a bit, you can then see the control status. So this is the bit where you can quickly understand how many controls have been implemented, how many have been failed, or how many are work in progress. And again, viewing that list of all the controls is fairly easy. You can just click on it. And the system is automatically, by leveraging that template, it is then able to drill down into all of those control families. So you will be able to see the progress across the control sets, across the control family. And just scrolling down, you can then filter it down by respective controls belonging to a specific control family. Now, again, this is an interesting piece because you have that full list of controls just in one consolidated place. You don't have to really manage multiple Excel spreadsheets to go in and identify and update every single time any improvement action has been taken on that on that specific control. So yeah, within the control family, you can see the list of all the controls. On the right, what you also see is the control ID associated with it and what points are achieved for that specific control, and how many are achieved by you as an organization, and how many are achieved by Microsoft being a cloud service provider for your organization. You can also filter it down by status as well. So how many controls have been passed or how many are probably out of scope, so not something relevant for my organization. And you can also filter it down by the control family. So yeah, just taking a step further. So every control has got some sort of improvement actions that you might need to be taking in order to, again, like improve your overall compliance posture. So the system automatically maps those improvement actions in association with those controls. So within the improvement actions, you can see that you have got your improvement actions as well as Microsoft actions. Now let's taking a step into the your improvement actions. This is the place where you can filter it down by a control family to say that I'm just looking at systems and information integrity control family, and I want to understand what are the improvement actions I need to be taking for that specific category. So quite powerful in a sense that you have all of that mapping and all of that automation in one place, and you have to just manage everything from this specific assessment. Now let's taking an example into one such improvement action. So from a compliance officer or from a privacy professional standpoint, if they're coming in, if they're getting a view of their improvement action, they can then come in and say that probably this might be a thing for maybe the records manager to sort of work on to define that retention periods. Or maybe there is an information governance team that should be ideally working on this particular task. So you can basically assign an action for this improvement action to that individual. So you can basically suggest that it should be probably a task for that individual. You can assign that specific task to them, and for them, for the end user, they would be getting an email notification, which they can then go in and come into this interface, and they can then start to put in their actions. So things like they will then be able to fill in that, the testing is still going on, or we are still testing some retention policies against some specific data. So they can put in their test status as to, they have passed it or it has been failed with high risk, and specify a test date. They can add any additional test notes and any additional notes as well, and attach any specific documentations. And once that is implemented, they can then specify that whether it's implemented or it has been planned to basically define those retention periods. And then ultimately, this is a very interesting bit, which is about standards and regulations. So this is the bit where it is then mapping that improvement actions to those controls. So very quickly, you will be able to quickly understand that this is not just mapping that control to the data protection baseline, but there are some common controls in GDPR as well that this improvement action is aligning to. So it is sort of removing that duplicate effort for you to go in to every single assessment and manually update that improvement action. It is mapping all of those duplicate controls within a single improvement action for you to then go in and just modify this, just amend it. So the moment you say that it has been implemented and you just hit save, all of the controls that were there in the data protection baseline as well as the GDPR assessment, both of them would be updated automatically and the compliance score will be enhanced accordingly. So quite powerful in that sense. So it's reducing that overhead for every individual to then go in and look for and scan for every single control family and map all of those controls and improvement actions together. So the system is automatically doing that for you. And I also touched on the Microsoft Actions as well, which is all about how Microsoft has implemented those controls in the first place, and what sort of testing has been undergone from a Microsoft standpoint to implement that control. So let's take a look at one of those Microsoft improvement actions. So in here, I'm just taking into one such example where you will be then able to see, how Microsoft has implemented that specific control.
And this goes hand in hand with the collaboration that you've been talking about, where you've got the organization and the actions that they need to be able to keep on top of and monitor. And then now you're showing us the Microsoft side of things, where, from a Microsoft's perspective, this is what you can do to be able to make sure that it's, it adheres to the compliance and the rules related to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, Andrew. Right on spot. So yeah, I mean, this is the place where you can, from a compliance manager who's working on this assessment, they can then come in and quickly understand that how has those controls been implemented by Microsoft, what level of testing has been conducted, and which controls does this improvement action map to. So they will be able to see the full list of controls as well. And again, having that collaboration piece where you can collaborate with multiple stakeholders within your organization by assigning them specific actions and for them to then come back in and then update those improvement actions. So you're actually collaborating on them with them on a single interface. You don't have to really navigate into different Excel spreadsheets to then send out emails for those spreadsheets and try and collaborate all of that information together. So it's all done in one single place. And again, as and when you take those sort of improvement actions, your compliance score will be updated automatically based on the based on the impact every improvement action has. So again, just moving on into the assessments, I think I've just given you a brief tour on what the assessments would look like and how you can basically manage and have that collaboration going on with multiple stakeholders. And how you can basically keep up to date with the regulations as well. So even if there are any updates that are happening across the different regulations, our team sort of keeps up to date with the assessment templates. So they will sort of keep on updating those assessments if there are any changes, and you will sort of get a notification to say that there has been a pending update. So I think I can show you one example where in the improvement actions, you can see that if there is any pending update against a specific improvement action, you have the ability to review that update and see whether you need to implement that in your current environment or it's not something that should be implemented. So our teams are sort of keeping on top of it in terms of updating those assessments in compliance with in basically updating their assessment templates in accordance with the regulation changes. So yeah, like in this instance, you can see there has been a pending update. Now it's up to you to review that update and whether you want to modify it or not. And talking of assessments, there are a range of assessment templates available. Like I mentioned, there are specific templates around industry standards, some cybersecurity specific framework templates, and also there are premium templates that can be leveraged. So these are all sector specific, industry specific. So yeah, and the templates are constantly like increasing. You can see there are around 678 items in my my template view. But again, these are constantly being updated, improvised, and people are just keeping on top of it. And additionally, you can have.
You have a question, Sanjana, about whether or not Compliance Manager is primarily a cybersecurity and privacy tool, or can additional information for things like financial controls and be added to Compliance Manager to be able to monitor?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I mean, compliance manager is basically helping you assess your overall compliance posture against the industry standards that are sort of relevant to your organization. But additionally, you can have your own controls brought into the platform. So you can basically have your own custom template. So if you as an organization, if you have got some very specific controls that you would want to bring in and assess your overall compliance score against that, you have the full flexibility to do that. You can basically create your own custom template, or you can extend a Microsoft template. So maybe for a financial institution, there could be things like if they want to adhere to PCI, so they can leverage that PCI template and basically extend that and bring in their own set of controls within that template, and then use that same interface to then manage their overall assessment.
Thank you. Yeah.
Perfect. And I think that sort of sums my demonstration in terms of just a very high level overview of Compliance Manager. I'm sure there are areas that might be very specific to certain organizations, and yeah, happy to take up those questions as well. But again, from a Compliance Manager, it's giving you that overall view of how compliance is looking in your environment and helping you keep up to date with those compliance regulations by keeping a track of what sort of improvement actions you need to be taking and what sort of controls you need to be implementing.
Thank you, Sanjana. That's fantastic. Brilliant. Thanks. Great overview. And what I think we're going to do now is we'll move on to Jonathan, who's going to help us. No, actually, we've got another question. So, Andy, do you want to take the reins on the questions?
Yeah, so sticking to the Menti poll itself, so our third sort of pop quiz question is, how much was Citibank fined for not remediating previously identified deficiency in the risk management control requirements? Was it $300 million, $400 million, $500 million, or $1 billion? So if you go to menti.com and enter the code on the right-hand side, or if you've already got it open, your question should automatically refresh with question number 3. If you have a go at answering this quiz question, we can find out what they were fined more recently with the control deficiencies that they had. So it looks like quite a few people have said $500 million was the fine. Brilliant. So I see there's a couple of people who've answered $100 billion. That would be quite a hefty fine. So Bradley, can you give us the answer to that? I know we've got
I can do indeed. Yep. So the actual answer is actually 400 million. So a fair if you got it right, but no, it's not 500 million, and unfortunately, no, it's not 100 billion because that's an extortionate amount of money.
Thank you very much for that. Now, talking about with Sanjana taking us through Compliance Manager itself, we're going to talk about looking at the next steps, and I think Jonathan, you're going to be covering it in terms of connecting the dots and taking action around the roadmap to remediation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we spent a lot of time going over what's included in the product, the templates that you can load in. I know there were some questions earlier, and Sanjana did a great job answering some of that. So you can customize the requirements that are in the tool itself as well. So you can bring in your own set of controls. In the US, we have Sarbanes-Oxley, so you can bring in your own set of Sarbanes-Oxley's controls as they apply to your organization here. So that's a lot of the benefit of the product, is you can customize this and twist the lens, right, as you view the tool into whatever it is that you have a need for from there. And then you can make sure that you create a plan for remediation as it applies to your environment. So beyond just being able to see what the gaps are, what the issues are, Andy had mentioned earlier about the set of controls that that Microsoft recommends to help mitigate some of the risks that are out there. The tool itself can give you insight into that and say, hey, you don't have multi-factor turned on, or you don't have this specific requirement within it. And then it's a matter of like, what do we need to do now? How do we get this in place? Within the tool itself, as Sanjana mentioned, you have some improvement actions that are recommended within there. A lot of that tied to the other Microsoft stack of offerings there. You think of information protection, you think of the e-discovery capabilities within the compliance portal within there. So you have kind of a built-in set of recommendations on what to take along on your journey from there. But in addition to that, there's other mechanisms that you need to account for to do so. Things of outside of the Microsoft 365 environment, things that are on-premise, things are very specific to your organization. That's when you want to build from this. As when you want to have the transparency as you build in, implementation actions and remediation plans, and to do that. So that's kind of the next step from there. It's great to have the insight and the transparency that's built in, but ultimately we want to get to the point where we're actually taking action from there, and then we're tracking that over time. So there was another question in the chat about, how do we handle collaboration in here? So one of the great benefits is that if you have a specific control or requirement that's in there, and let's say you're doing control testing. I see another question on control testing that's coming into here. You start an assessment, you have a control, there's either a control failure or a gap that's identified. You can actually put an implementation plan or remediation plan within there, assign that task to an individual or to a group to say, hey, this is the plan to remediate, this is how we're going to close this gap. And then track that over time to say, hey, by this certain date, or 6 months out, or 12 months out, we are going to have this in place. From there, you can upload evidence, right, as you would on any other GRC tool from there. So that whole tracking of remediation is another benefit of the product within here. And then also from there, as you go into how do we tackle this, right? If you come with a control gap or an item that needs to be remediated, you might have a question on, well, where do we start, or what is going to be something that's going to be held accountable to us. The tool itself can actually you can actually see what Microsoft has been tested against. Another item that was shown previously, you can actually see the control testing that was performed against Microsoft from there. So at the very least, you have a place to start. You have somewhere to focus on to say, hey, I know that we need to apply this. Here's what another entity did that might not fit exactly what we need to do as an organization, but at least gives you a leg up on what to do, what's coming down, and how to address it, at least to start going forward. And then when you start implementing these solutions, you start getting credit for it within the tool itself. So another great product feature is that as you implement changes, as you make changes into your environment, or you deploy other solutions, or you mark things in the tool to say, hey, this is in place, or we have this now, you get credit for that across the board, either in an automated fashion where the tool can hook into your tenant and see the changes that you've made, or that you go and manually update the specific requirements in there. So you have that crosswalk, across whatever requirements are in scope for you, and you're able to see what is actually now in place when you take action and you deploy a solution. That's a significant benefit, that once you address an issue, you can actually see, hey, this is now giving me credit across multiple different frameworks, multiple regulations from there, and it's great to see that impact almost immediately right, from the council, from this tool, and have that transparency to be able to report it up into, whomever your stakeholders are, whomever that you need to report to, whether that's leadership or down to the individual stakeholders who are responsible for that implementation. So there's lots of different benefits and lots of different stakeholders that can use this to be able to see, hey, this is how well we're doing. This is where we started. This is how we are now along our journey, and this is the plan to move forward from there. So you're able to get all that in kind of a single interface that multiple folks can use and multiple different groups can use to be able to do that. So you kind of break down those silos that you have within organizations to do that.
And,
so a lot
Jonathan,
of that, yeah.
Is that reflected in the that compliance score dial that Sanjana was sort of demoing previously, where it can change based on the actions that you've taken to address those particular controls or those particular actions?
Yeah, exactly. So as you implement controls and you get things into place, you can see, the credit that you're given from there. And when you see the score, it's specific to what you're looking at. So if I look at it just through the data protection baseline, I have a certain score. If I want to say, how am I doing against another framework or regulation, you think of NIST 853, GDPR, anything else, you can say, hey, how am I doing my score against all that? And when you talk about the score, the goal is not necessarily to say, hey, our score is 100%, so we're fully compliant with it. It's more of a reflection on, how do you track your progress from there, and how do we keep getting better from there? So a lot of those benefits within there. So I'm seeing some more questions here in the chat. We've had some comments in here about getting access from there. I think we've posted a couple of those things here. And then the automation on loading in requirements. So the tool itself gives you a sample template, essentially a layout to say, hey, insert your controls in this, in this spreadsheet like this, in this manner. You can load that up and then put it into the tool so you can track it there. So it makes it very easy to just insert or upload whatever requirements that you have from there. So this is something that we've done as an organization for things like end user developed applications, right? That's a very customized process from here that we've seen a lot of organizations get into. We have a custom template that we've built. We can load up into your compliance manager tool itself, and then we can use that to track and respond to how our controls are being implemented. So the tool itself makes it very easy to load whatever requirements, whatever controls, or whatever frameworks that apply just to your organization and customize those. And Jana went into a little bit about how you can even build on top of the pre-existing ones, right? Say, hey, I have this template that's already built. Maybe only a subset of that applies to me, but I have some additional ones that I want to include. You can build that onto the tool, and it's customizable to the point where you can include all of that into there.
We've got a question which is asking about, can the tool pull information from somewhere like Intune, for example, to sort of link Compliance Manager to other solutions that Microsoft might already have?
Yep, there are specific automations that are built into Compliance Manager, and this is consistently being updated by the product team. So right now, anything in your M365 environment, you can think of all of those configurations or settings to be pulled into. Intune has I want to say a couple of settings that specifically apply to some of the built-in frameworks that we can pull in. But there are consistent updates from the product team on hooking into the rest of your Microsoft stack and your Microsoft universe to pull from there. If there are items or other controls that are not being pulled in directly, you can still give yourself credit for those specific requirements in the product itself. And again, similar, whatever you have in there as showing as compliant or in place will give you credit across multiple different frameworks from there, and you'll see it kind of disappear off the improvement action screen as well.
We've got another questions about automated controls in other applications. Can they pull information from other automated controls from other applications into Compliance Manager?
So that is still a roadmap item, and I don't want to speak for the Microsoft team on here necessarily, but what Microsoft is looking to build is, not just automation within your M365 environment, but also any custom automation that you can build. So that's still something that's planned for the future, not in place currently, but in the future, you will have the ability to write your own custom search. So think of things like on-premise applications, or you have, a specific application or server or whatever else, whatever other asset you want to look into, you would have the ability to write your own testing or whatever control you want to bring in from there. That's again a roadmap item that's not currently in place yet, but something that is coming down the line in the future.
Now, going back to Sanjana, going back to what you talked about, the Microsoft sort of privacy offering itself, is that going to be linked into Compliance Manager as well, similar to what we talked about with other solutions like Intune, etc.?
Yeah, so Privacy Manager, again, like it's a fairly new solution, and the plan for that is the way it works with Compliance Manager is there are specific privacy specific templates like GDPR, CCPA, LGPD. Those could be utilized within Compliance Manager to assess your overall privacy landscape in a sense. And then you can leverage privacy management to basically look for where personal information is residing and assess those privacy risks. Yeah.
Will that almost sort of act as a bit of a scanning tool to sort of see where, within files, within, the Microsoft stack, where they can go in and look at whether or not there's certain types of information from a privacy perspective?
Yeah, exactly that. It's about identifying where your personal information is residing across the Microsoft stack, and also helping you understand if there are any privacy risks luring around. And also, not just that, it's also about understanding and responding to those data subject requests at scale as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Great. So we can move on to the next slide and just think about, how we get started on here. So, and Ben, you can go ahead and click next to get the rest of the items on here. So we've talked a lot about, loading up Compliance Manager, loading up templates, customizing them from here, seeing the improvement actions, and then actually implementing these changes from there. So a lot of the questions we get from our clients is just where do we start? Where do we start along the journey? You're trying to intake everything that the tool is giving you. You've got a significant amount of recommendations and improvement actions that is spit out. You've got a significant amount of regulations that apply to you. You've loaded them up. What do we do to start? So what we've built is a couple of different offerings, and you can find this in App Store on the Microsoft side. In conjunction with Microsoft to say, let's give you some quick start workshops to help, again, kickstart your compliance journey from there. So it's great that we can use the tool to see and have transparency into where we are, but ultimately the real value is, what does that mean from a roadmap perspective, and what we actually develop to help mitigate our risk right from there. So we have a couple of different workshops to go, depending on what you want to focus on right from there. If you want to focus on, hey, I want to use Microsoft information protection, and I know we have sensitive data in our environment, and I want to be able to find some of that and how that applies to my kind of risk posture. I know there was a question earlier about finding user created data, whether it contains privacy information, how we handle that. So we can have a workshop built around, all right, let's use some of the discovery functionality within your licensing, and also how that flows down into kind of your compliance posture, and then leave you with a roadmap to say, these are the items that you need to address. Here's how we prioritize some of it, and ultimately here's how we get to a state that's that's acceptable for both you as an organization, and then how you move forward from there. So we have different levels of that on what you want to do with your with your current licensing. We can show you features of some of the upgraded licensing to show you some of the functionality that comes with it, some of the tools and benefits of some of that. We can give you basically an entire menu to say, hey, whatever you want to focus on, whatever is your primary, secondary, tertiary concerns, we can focus on that at the beginning, and leave you with an actual plan of action from there. And then also Once we develop that plan of action, we can help you execute against that. If you need help running through the items that were delivered, again, with our partnership with Robert Half, we have resources available to help you, go through whatever items that come out from there, and how to address all that. If you have consistent concerns about, hey, how do we track how we're doing across 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, we can also help you with that, either the project management piece from an advisory standpoint. From there, again, helping you take the output of the tool and translate that into actionable items that we can address from there. So we've created a couple of these in conjunction with Microsoft, again, to help kickstart the journey, give you somewhere to start, give you a plan, and then help you execute that plan as needed. So these are a couple of things that we've helped develop over the last few months in conjunction with Microsoft, and also using our experience as Protiviti in this space for a while. Any other questions from the chat? Anything else we can address here?
No, I think we've covered most of the questions now from the chat.
That's great, Jonathan. Thank you very much. And Andy, back to you, I think.
Thanks very much, guys. If you go to the next slide. So talking about the compliance offerings that that Protiviti offers, and Jonathan's taken us through, if we take a step back from just specifically talking about the compliance landscape itself, what we've thought about is looking at things from a risk lens and saying, what does the roadmap to the IT risk and compliance management look like? Because again, with compliance itself, compliance risk, ultimately known as integrity risk, is going to be a component of many other types of risks that are going to be available out there. And I think one of the attendees who has pointed out that is compliance manager, essentially it's sort of like a GRC tool where you're able to record your risks, your actions, to track your tasks, etc. The answer is yes, to a certain extent, but it does allow you to be able to hook into all the other things that Microsoft, is able to offer and is connected up to. But if we take a step back from that and have a look at it from a governance, risk and control perspective itself, this roadmap diagram that we have here allows us to be able to say, okay, within the GRC space itself, what's in scope for your organization? Whether it's geographical scope or it's business line and business unit scope and organizational, scope, to technical scope itself. And Ben, if you go to the next part of this slide itself, if we take a view from a step back and say, how does the roadmap look like when we try and meet compliance and manage our risk and compliance posture? We can have a look at these things and say, okay, rather than take everything and try and do everything at once, we can have a roadmap around looking at certain specific areas through the compliance and risk space itself, and say, what do we want to be able to initially address? What would be included in the first release of our roadmap compared to future releases that we may want to do as part of a 3-year program, a 5-year program, etc. So in this example that we have here itself, we're looking at things from a risk and compliance space itself. What do we want to be able to include technically, and do we want to include certain areas? So in this example that we have within the technical scope itself, we're going to be looking at compliance. Maybe we want to link it up and look at the data privacy side of things, and also maybe GDPR management as well. Now, if you go to the next part, Ben, how do these things integrate with those integration points that we have? And this is where the technology can come in and help out massively, whether it's using Compliance Manager to be able to manage and monitor your compliance through the various different areas that you're going to be interested in, or where you're going to be looking at the privacy side of things, looking at the Privacy Manager and privacy sort of management applications itself. What that means is it allows us to be able to pinpoint and identify some of the things that we want to do as a first stage, and roadmap that out to other areas which can sort of follow at a later stage as well. And again, by performing these in a phased out approach or a stage approach as part of this roadmap, it means that you can try and test out those particular areas before trying to do everything at once and trying to sort of apply everything simultaneously and find out that, you know, there are certain things that don't quite work in the way that you might want to. So this roadmap view that we have and this sort of release view that we have allows us to be able to think about how do some of these components fit together, and how do they then, you know, integrate with these points that we have. So in this example, we've got the technical areas which we'll look at from a compliance and privacy point of view. We'll integrate that with some policy enforcement information around transactional data as well as compliance for privacy perspective. And if you go to the next pop in, what features do we want from those areas that we want to be able to build in? So from our perspective, we may want to have that risk and control manage element where you can add in your risk and control information, align that to your company's policies and standards. You can also make sure that you've got your control design and control testing in place. You may want risk scanning or emerging threat scanning for future risks that you may encounter as part of, you know, releasing new products and new services. You may also want to include policy management processes where you're able to make sure that your policies align and sort of can match up to what regulation, you know, the different regulatory standards and regulatory policies that might be out there, as well as making sure that some of your procedures align to, you know, what you're defining out with the regulations, as well as your standard policies and procedures are as well. The other area is looking at some of your configuration baselines. So from a more technical perspective, if you've got configurations and settings for various different systems, you can also apply that. From a less sort of system-based focus, but you're looking at more from a process type focus, then you could define and look at some of your processes, such as your financial reporting process, your tax and accounting processes. And then from a visibility point of view, you can include areas such as system reporting or continuous monitoring of some of these things that you start to put in place as well. So from a road mapping point of view, this allows you to be able to think about the steps that you would take, and allows you to then sort of define out in incremental areas the stories that you want to be able to address and release at each stage of its group as well. Okay, so if we go to the next slide itself, before we sort of wrap up with Jez, we've got a last final quiz, which is basically where are you on your compliance journey. So going through what we've gone through now, looking at the various different, you know, risk and compliance areas, looking at compliance manager, and also looking about how we link in with other areas within the Microsoft stack and your roadmap to a wider sort of compliance and risk management perspective within your organizations itself. Where are you on your compliance journey? Are you at the start? You're currently in progress and it's, you know, relatively immature, or you're looking for solutions, or you already have solutions in place, but you want to be able to apply best practice to what you currently have? Where do you think you are in terms of, you know, your current progress itself? And if you can go to menti.com and enter in the code, or if you already have your browser open from the previous Menti, you can answer this question, and we can have a quick look at the answers. And again, these answers are randomized, so, you know, it doesn't specifically pick out anybody or any organization. It's just so that people can sort of share the information and get some transparency around, you know, what other people are doing within other organizations and where they may be looking at as well. And as we can see here, it's quite interesting that, you know, it seems to be quite well spread out within, you know, within the 5 areas itself. So from the 19 responses that we've got so far, we've got 3 at the start. We've got the other areas which are slightly ahead with in progress or looking for a solution. Currently, solutions, there's quite a few organizations where solutions in place, and then also there's some who are looking to align to best practices as well. So it looks like it's quite evenly spread out across the different levels of the journey itself. I think in terms of, I think we've got a question, some questions around some of the templates as well. So I think a question was, I saw ISO 27001 template, but didn't notice there's one for ISO 27701. I believe within the 27701, I'm not sure if there is specifically one built in. There are literally hundreds of customized templates that are built into Compliance Manager. If there isn't one for ISO 27701, it can be created as part of a custom creation as well. So I think Sanjana said there is one for 27701. So yeah, so I'm a bit behind on the on the Q&As there. Yes, I think there are also templates for NIST as well within the templates that are already pre-built within Compliance Manager. Okay, so if we switch over back to the slides, Jez, I think you're going to do a bit of a wrap up on today's session.
Yep, thank you, Andy. Thank you, everyone. We're just coming to the end of our session now. Thanks for staying with us. It's been a great session. Just a couple of final thoughts, really, from all of us, really, that, you know, it's obvious that compliance and the security journey can't be ignored. It's becoming an increasingly focused area from not only organisations' perspective, but across industry and all the regulatory bodies. From the poll results, we've seen that obviously a lack of compliance can undermine not only an organisation from a financial perspective, but the brand damage is significant when you're hauled up in front of the public around the issues that you have. And it's really, you know, we kind of seen it's important for all businesses to implement the right compliance controls, and that can really help you maximise the investments you've got and really be proactive in the way that you're managing and giving visibility to the organisation around all of your risk and regulatory challenges. And I think we've seen today the investment that Microsoft are making into this space. Compliance Manager is a growing force across the Microsoft M365 stack, and organisations will have the absolute opportunity to take advantage and take control of that to reduce their risks significantly. So, you know, there's some great understanding and great lessons we've learned today. Thank you, Ben.
Brilliant.
One last slide for us, really. These are all our contact details. So you can scan our LinkedIn profiles here with your phone, and all our details there for us to get in touch. What I will say is we will share the recording with everyone, so you can redigest and relearn and take advantage of the chats today. You can also see Protiviti at Microsoft Ignite. So Microsoft Ignite is Microsoft's customer technical launch conference, which is coming up in November. And we spoke earlier about new innovation coming with Compliance Manager. That will be one area where I'm pretty sure you'll see some next generation innovation coming from Compliance Manager. So some of the challenges and some of the requirements today, you'll more than likely see innovation coming to remediate those from Microsoft in November. We'll share the details about the top risks. We'll share even the details about our compliance solutions that Jonathan articulated earlier in the conversation. And for those that are equally interested and want to do more about compliance, we have another webinar on November the 11th, which will be taken care of by the same team. So we'll send details if you want to engage with that and sign up for that to learn more. We'll also send details of the one-pager details of all of the solutions, and we'll also pass on the Microsoft Digital Defence Report, so you can consume that as your leisure as well. So with 2 minutes to go, I'd just like to say firstly thank you to you for attending today and staying with us and being and asking so many great questions and being interactive with us. That's been really great. Really enjoyed that. Secondly, I'd like to say thank you to the team, not only Sanjana, Jonathan and Andrew, but also the guys behind the scene, Ben, Bradley, Gary, and all of the guys that have been working to make the operation and the presentation for you today flow as we have done, and give you the information and impart the information that you can take away with you. So being in a place where I can give you at least a minute back, I'd like to say thank you again from myself. You'll see some more details from us coming shortly. So enjoy the rest of your evening, afternoon or morning, and we look forward to engaging you in the future around all things Microsoft and all things Microsoft Security Compliance. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.